Hey everyone. I'm Robert. I'm 32 years old, and my own parents once told me they wished I'd never been born. Right to my face. It was the moment that broke me, but it was also the moment that set me free. Before I tell you how a horrific car crash and an unexpected promotion changed everything, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. The air in the house was thick with the smell of my mother's Sunday pot roast and unspoken resentment. It was a smell I knew better than my own cologne. For years, I had learned to navigate the emotional minefield of my parents' home, stepping lightly, speaking softly, and writing checks frequently. But that day, I was just tired. Tired of the balancing act, tired of being the solution to problems I didn't create. It all started, as it often did, with money. My father, Richard, was flipping through a glossy boat catalog at the dinner table, a dangerous hobby of his. He tapped a picture of a sleek, white vessel that probably cost more than my apartment. "Look at this beauty, Helen," he said to my mother. "The Hendersons just got one. We'd look great in this, wouldn't we?" My mother, Helen, a woman who could weaponize silence, just gave a non-committal hum, but her eyes flickered towards me. That was the signal. The baton was being passed. I braced myself. "We were thinking, Rob," my father started, his voice casual, too casual. "A little contribution from you would get this in the driveway before summer." I put my fork down. Gently. "Dad, I can't right now." The casual tone vanished. "What do you mean, you can't? You got that bonus last quarter." "I'm putting it towards a down payment," I said, my voice steady. "An investment property. I told you about it." He scoffed, throwing the catalog onto the table. "An investment? Your family is the best investment you could make. What's gotten into you? Getting selfish in your old age." And there it was. The button. The one they had installed themselves and knew just how to push. The guilt button. "It's not selfish to plan for my own future," I replied, the words feeling foreign and sharp in my mouth. That's when the dam broke. My father's face turned a familiar shade of blotchy red. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Your future? Your future was secured by us. We gave you everything." I stayed seated. "I've paid for everything myself since I was 18. In fact, I've paid for a lot of your things, too." The truth was a grenade, and it had just gone off in the middle of their perfect suburban dining room. My father's voice escalated into a full-blown roar, the one that used to make me shrink as a child. "You ungrateful brat. You've been nothing but a disgrace since the day you were born." The words hit me, but I didn't flinch. I was numb. I looked at my mother, hoping for a lifeline, a referee, anything. Instead, she delivered the final blow. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, which made it 1,000 times worse. "We wish you never existed." Silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a bomb counting down. Something inside me, a tightly wound spring I had been holding down for 3 decades, finally snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I calmly folded my napkin, placed it on the table, and stood up. I looked at my father, whose chest was still heaving, and at my mother, whose face was a mask of cold disappointment. I straightened my tie, a nervous habit I thought I'd outgrown. "Then I'll stop existing for you," I said. I walked out of the dining room, down the hall, and to the front door. I didn't slam it. I closed it softly behind me, the click of the latch echoing the finality of my decision. The cold October air hit my face. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. 30 minutes later, I was parked in a desolate Walgreens lot, the engine off. I finally looked at my phone. The screen was a constellation of missed calls and notifications. 42 of them. From Mom, Dad, and my sister, Ellie. My thumb hovered over their names before I swiped them all away. I had vanished, and for the first time I had no idea what came next. The question wasn't just where I would go, but who I would become now that I was no longer their son. To understand why I walked out that door without a second thought, you have to understand that the door had been closing little by little for years. Started not with a bang, but with a piece of paper. I was 22, fresh out of college with a business degree and a world of possibilities. My prized possession was an acceptance letter to a prestigious master's program in Chicago. It was my dream. I'd worked 2 jobs through my undergrad years just to have a shot at it. I remember holding the thick, creamy envelope in my hands, feeling the weight of my future. I brought it home, ready to share the news, expecting, for once, a celebration. My parents were in the kitchen, huddled over a pile of mail that looked far more ominous than mine. My father was rubbing his temples, and my mother was staring blankly at a document with intimidating letterhead. "What's wrong?" I asked. My father sighed, a heavy, theatrical sound. "The bank. This adjustable rate mortgage is killing us. The payments are about to skyrocket." My mother looked at me, her eyes filled with a familiar, weary plea. "We don't know what we're going to do, Robert. We could lose the house. The 4-bedroom colonial they'd bought when I was a kid. The house that was the stage for all their neighborhood parties, the symbol of their success. It was their identity." I looked from their panicked faces to the acceptance letter in my hand. Chicago, a new life, an escape, and then I looked back at them. The guilt was a physical thing, a heavy coat settling on my shoulders. My dream felt selfish, frivolous, in the face of their potential ruin. They never explicitly asked me not to go. They didn't have to. Their fear was a command. That night, I quietly logged into my student portal and declined the university's offer. The next day, I accepted a junior marketing position at a local real estate firm. Paid well enough to help. The first check I wrote wasn't for a deposit on my own apartment. It was to them. To help with the mortgage, I'd said. It was supposed to be temporary. But temporary became the new normal. A few years later, my younger sister, Ellie, was getting ready for college. She'd been accepted to a private art school with a tuition that made my eyes water. "How are we going to afford this?" I asked my parents one night. "Don't worry," my father said, clapping me on the back. "We've got a plan." I found out what that plan was when the first tuition bill came. Not to their house, but to my small, 3rd-floor walk-up apartment. My name was on the student loan cosigner documents they had conveniently forgotten to mention. When I confronted them, my mother just waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, Robert, it's just a formality. With your salary, you can handle the payments for her college fund. It's what a good big brother does." And so, my life became a series of automatic payments. My salary, which should have been building my own future, was instead patching the leaks in their financial boat and paving my sister's golden path. I paid for their mortgage, her tuition, the new roof, the emergency vet bill for their dog. I was less of a son and more of a human ATM, and the only time they ever seemed truly happy to see me was when a bill was due. The acceptance letter sat in a box in my closet, a yellowing ghost of a life I could have had. That was the weight I carried into that dining room. It wasn't just about a boat. It was about the crushing weight of a decade of silent sacrifice. In my family, there were 2 distinct roles, 2 orbits around which my parents' world revolved. There was Ellie, the sun, and there was me, a distant, functional moon, useful for controlling the tides of their debt but otherwise cold and uninteresting. Ellie was the golden child. She could do no wrong. She was creative, spirited, the artist. Her paintings, which to my untrained eye looked like colorful messes, were framed and hung in the living room like masterpieces. Her C in calculus was hand-waved away with, "Well, she's right-brained. She's not meant for numbers." Her whims were commands. A trip to Europe for artistic inspiration? Of course. A new MacBook Pro because her old one was stifling her creativity? Absolutely. My achievements, on the other hand, were met with a polite nod, like a stranger acknowledging you on the street. I remember one dinner, a few years before the final blow-up. I was buzzing with excitement. "I got the promotion," I announced, unable to keep the pride out of my voice. "Senior marketing manager. It comes with a nice raise in my salary." "Oh, that's nice, dear," my mother said, passing the salad bowl. My father grunted. "Good. Maybe you can finally help us pay off that credit card." Before I could even respond, Ellie clapped her hands. "Speaking of amazing things, I've decided on my summer plans. A 3-week photography workshop in Tuscany. The entire conversation immediately pivoted. For the next hour, I listened to them gush over her itinerary, discuss flight options, and marvel at her adventurous spirit. My promotion, the result of months of 60-hour work weeks, was forgotten before the main course was even served. I sat there, invisible, just a wallet with a heartbeat. The dynamic was reinforced by the extended family, particularly my mother's sister, Aunt Carol. She was the designated family mediator, which meant her job was to call and gently gaslight me into compliance whenever I showed signs of rebellion. Her calls always started the same way. "Robert, honey, your mother called me. She's so worried about you." One time, after I'd hesitated to pay for a new transmission for my dad's truck, she laid it on thick. "You have to understand, you're the man of the family now, in a way. You're the stable one. Ellie is a free spirit and your parents, well, they did their best. It's your turn to be the pillar. A family has to support each other." Her words were like honey mixed with poison. They made my sacrifice sound noble, my servitude sound like strength. For a long time, I believed her. I thought this was just what families did. One person carries the weight so the others can fly. But the older I got, the more I saw it for what it was. It wasn't support. It was a system. Ellie was the designated success story, the one they could brag about. I was the designated utility, the one who paid for the stage she performed on. They needed her to shine, and they needed me to be the silent, thankless stagehand working in the dark. Every dollar I gave them wasn't just money. It was fuel for the narrative that she was the one who mattered, and I was the one who wasn't. It was a slow, soul-crushing erosion of my own worth, one transaction at a time. The 6 months leading up to that final Sunday dinner were different. Something in me had started to shift. Maybe it was turning 30. Maybe it was seeing my friends buy houses, get married, and live lives that were truly their own. Or maybe it was just the slow, dawning realization that if I didn't draw a line in the sand, I would drown. I had been working with a real estate mentor, a savvy older guy named David, who had taken me under his wing. He saw potential in me that my own family never did. He was teaching me about investing, about building wealth, about creating a future that wasn't dependent on a bi-weekly paycheck. "The key, Rob, is to make your money work for you," he'd said, sketching out figures on a napkin at a coffee shop. "This duplex just came on the market. It's a fixer-upper, but the numbers work. With your savings and that bonus you mentioned, you could swing the down payment." For the first time in years, I felt a spark of that old ambition, the one I'd buried with my master's program acceptance letter. The idea of owning something, of building something that was mine and mine alone, was intoxicating. I spent weeks running the numbers, inspecting the property, and getting my finances in order. This was my escape hatch, my path to independence. The bonus from my company came through, a significant amount that I had earmarked entirely for the duplex down payment. It was the first large sum of money I had ever earned that I didn't mentally sign over to my family. It felt like a declaration of independence. That's the context I was living in when my father slid that boat catalog across the dinner table. When he pointed to the gleaming fiberglass hull and the 6-figure price tag, he wasn't just asking for a boat. He was, in his own oblivious way, trying to reclaim his territory. He was reasserting the old rule: what's mine is theirs. So when I said, "Dad, I can't right now," it wasn't just a refusal. It was a revolution. I saw the confusion in his eyes, followed by a flash of anger. I was deviating from the script. "I'm putting it towards a down payment," I explained, my heart hammering in my chest. "An investment property." The word investment seemed to offend him on a cellular level. It was a word for my future, not his present. My mother's lips thinned into a familiar line of disapproval. The atmosphere in the room went from tense to arctic. "You told us about that bonus, Robert," my mother said, her voice dangerously soft. "We were counting on that." "You were counting on my money for a luxury item you don't need," I shot back, a bit more forcefully than I intended, "while I'm trying to build a life for myself." My father slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "A life for yourself? We gave you your life. You live in that cheap apartment while we maintain this beautiful home. Don't you think you owe us a little comfort in our old age? And that was the moment of clarity. They didn't see my contributions as help or sacrifice. They saw it as rent, a fee I owed them for the crime of being born. The boat wasn't the issue. The duplex wasn't the issue. The issue was that I was finally choosing myself, and in their world, there was no room for that. My self-worth was a threat to their lifestyle. The argument that followed was just the noise of a system breaking down. Their final, cruel words weren't a spontaneous outburst. They were the desperate, last-ditch attempt to put me back in my box. But it was too late. I was already out. The 20-minute drive from my parents' house to the Walgreens parking lot was a blur. My mind was a silent, white void. No anger. No sadness. Just a profound and unsettling emptiness. I parked under the hum of a flickering fluorescent light, the purple and red glow of the store sign painting my dashboard in alien colors. For a long time, I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. The engine ticked as it cooled. The world outside felt muffled, distant. I was an astronaut who had just cut his tether to the mothership, floating in the vast, terrifying silence of space. Then my phone buzzed, and again, a relentless, frantic vibration against the passenger seat. I picked it up. 42 missed calls. A string of texts. Ellie, where are you? Mom is freaking out. Dad, Robert, pick up the phone. Now, Mom, this is ridiculous. Come back and talk this out like an adult. Ellie, Dad is losing his mind, call me. Talk this out. As if we hadn't been having the same one-sided conversation for 15 years. Like an adult. As if being an adult just meant silently writing checks until you died. Something inside me, something cold and hard and clear, took over. My fingers moved with a life of their own. I opened my banking app, my face illuminated by the cold blue light of the screen. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady, calm. My thumb hovered over the Scheduled Payments tab. I tapped it. There they were, the digital chains that had bound me for so long. First, the recurring payment to my father's mortgage account. A 4-figure sum that left my account on the first of every month. I tapped on it. A confirmation screen popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment? My finger pressed confirm without a tremor. The screen refreshed. The payment vanished. A single, invisible chain had just been broken. Next, the tuition portal for Ellie's art school. I logged in, navigated to the payment plan I had set up. The next installment was due in 3 days. A cripplingly large amount. I found the button, Cancel Automatic Payments. I clicked it, confirmed it. Another chain gone. I scrolled through the list. The monthly payment for my dad's car loan. Cancelled. The family cell phone plan that was under my name. I set a reminder to port my number to a new account tomorrow. For now, I just removed my card as the primary payment method. One by one, I dismantled the financial scaffolding that held their lives together. It took less than 5 minutes to undo more than a decade of servitude. When I was done, I stared at the screen, at the empty list of scheduled payments. It was the most beautiful, liberating thing I had ever seen. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. The emptiness inside me was slowly being replaced by something else. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was a quiet, fierce, and unfamiliar feeling. It was control. I started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove back to my small, third-floor apartment. The one my father called cheap. The one that was, for the first time, truly mine. I walked in, locked the door behind me, and turned my phone off. The silence that followed was absolute. And it was perfect. I slept for 10 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep, the kind of rest I hadn't had since I was a teenager. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through my window, and for a moment, I felt a disorienting sense of peace. Then, the reality of the previous night washed over me. I picked up my phone and turned it on. It was like opening a floodgate. The device buzzed and chirped uncontrollably for nearly a full minute as a deluge of notifications poured in. 68 missed calls. 40 new text messages. 20 voicemails. I ignored the calls and opened the texts. They were a masterclass in escalating panic. Ellie's started around 7 a.m. Ellie. Rob, seriously, where are you? Ellie. The tuition is due Friday. The payment didn't go through. Is something wrong with your card? Ellie. Robert. The school will drop my classes if it's not paid. This is not funny. Ellie. I'm going to fail my midterms because of you. You are ruining my life. My fathers were more blunt. Dad. You have 1 hour to call me back. Dad. Don't test me, boy. Dad, your mother is sick with worry. Look what you're doing to her. My mothers were the most interesting. After a dozen missed calls, a new number popped up. I knew it was her, borrowing a friend's phone. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was dripping with condescension. Robert, this has gone on long enough. Her voice, tight and strained, filled my ear. You're being overly dramatic. Your father says things he doesn't mean when he's angry, you know that. Now, you've made your little point. It's time to come home and fix the mess you've made with Ellie's college fund. A mess I've made. Not a word of apology. Not a hint of remorse. Just an order to return to my post and resume my duties. I deleted the voicemail. I got up, showered, and got dressed for work. The routine felt grounding. As I was heading out the door, my phone rang with an unknown number again. I knew it was her. I answered. What? I said, my voice flat. Robert. Finally. It was my mother. Don't you what me? What is going on? We just got a notice from the bank about the mortgage. I'm sure you did, I said, walking down the stairs. What did you do? She demanded, her voice rising. I did exactly what you wanted, I replied, stepping out into the crisp morning air. I stopped existing. That includes my bank account. You're on your own. You can't be serious. We could lose the house. After everything we've done for you. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. Done for me? You've done things to me. Goodbye, Helen. I hung up before she could respond and blocked the new number. My hand was shaking slightly, but my resolve was like steel. Their panic was the confirmation I never knew I needed. They weren't mourning the loss of their son. They were mourning the loss of their subsidy. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was also the antidote to a lifetime of guilt. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. And that difference was everything. The chaos didn't stay confined to my phone. That evening, it showed up on my doorstep. I was heating up a frozen dinner when a frantic pounding started on my apartment door. It was too aggressive to be a neighbor. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Ellie. Her face was twisted in a mask of rage and desperation. I opened the door just a crack. What do you want, Ellie? She tried to push her way in. Let me in. We need to talk. I held the door firm. No. We can talk right here. You can't do this, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the narrow hallway. They're going to sell the house. Dad is talking about getting a lawyer to see if they have any rights to my inheritance from Grandma to pay for things. It's all your fault. The mention of a lawyer sent a chill down my spine. Not because I was scared, but because it showed how completely transactional their view of me was. They weren't thinking about reconciliation. They were thinking about litigation. My fault, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I've been paying for your life for the last 4 years, Ellie. I've been paying our parents' mortgage for longer than that. The moment I stop, and you call it my fault, you're just being selfish, she cried. You have the money. We don't. It's not fair. You're right, I said. It was never fair. An elderly woman from down the hall, Mrs. Gable, poked her head out of her door, her eyes wide with concern. Ellie didn't even notice. Her world had shrunk to the size of her own problems. I was about to close the door when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A name I hadn't seen in a while flashed on the screen. Mark, my best friend since childhood. Or so I thought. Maybe he was the voice of reason I needed. I held up a hand to Ellie. 1 second. I stepped back into my apartment and answered the call, my back to the open door. Mark? Hey man. Rob. What the hell is going on? His voice wasn't friendly. It was accusatory. I just got off the phone with your dad. He's a wreck. Your mom is crying. You're tearing them apart. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. You talked to my dad? Yeah, I did. He told me everything. About how you just walked out, cut them off over some stupid argument about a boat. Dude, that's your family. You don't just do that. I leaned against the wall, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. The ultimate betrayal. My best friend, the one who'd heard me complain for years about the financial pressure, the one who knew the whole story, had sided with them. You don't know the whole story, Mark, I said, my voice strained. I know enough. I know they're good people who love you. You're being a real jerk about this. He paused, and then his tone shifted slightly. Look, man, speaking of parents, mine are in a bit of a jam. I was actually going to ask if I could borrow a couple thousand, just until my next commission check comes in. I figured since you're doing so well. And there it was. The other shoe didn't just drop. It crashed through the floor. It wasn't a call from a concerned friend. It was a financial probe. He was checking to see if the Bank of Robert was still open for business before he criticized its management. I started laughing, a hollow, joyless sound. Ellie, still standing in the doorway, looked at me like I was insane. No, Mark, I said into the phone, my voice dripping with a newfound clarity. The bank is closed. Permanently. I hung up and looked at my sister, whose face was a mixture of confusion and anger. Then I looked past her at Mrs. Gable, who was still watching with a sad, knowing look in her eyes. She had seen this drama before. Go home, Ellie, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I closed the door, slid the deadbolt into place, and finally, for the first time since it all began, I let myself feel the full, crushing weight of being utterly and completely alone. The next few days were a strange mix of turmoil and tranquility. The calls and texts from my family and their emissaries, like Aunt Carol, continued, but I had learned to mute them. They were just background noise now, the static of a life I was no longer living. My apartment, once just a place to sleep, became a sanctuary. The silence was my shield, but I knew I couldn't just hide. I had to build. My salvation came in the form of my work. The real estate market was a ruthless, fast-paced world, and it demanded all of my attention. It was the perfect distraction. My mentor, David, had been right about the duplex, but I'd had to let it go. My down payment funds were now my emergency buffer. But there was another, much bigger project on the horizon. It was a massive commercial deal, a portfolio of office buildings that a tech company was looking to lease. It was the kind of deal that could change a career, and it was down to my firm and one other competitor. My boss, Mr. Davenport, a notoriously tough but fair man, had put me in charge of our pitch. He'd also put Ben on the team. Ben was my office rival. Slick, ambitious, and not above taking credit for other people's work. He saw the deal as his personal stepping stone to a partnership. The pressure was immense. Every day was a battle, not just with the competition, but with Ben, who questioned my every move. Are you sure about these projections, Robert? He'd ask in meetings, a smug look on his face. They seem a little optimistic. Normally, the stress would have sent me spiraling. I would have taken it home with me, let it curdle with my family issues into a toxic stew of anxiety. But now it was different. The fight at work felt clean, professional. It was a problem with rules and a clear objective. Compared to the emotional chaos of my family, it was a relief. My colleague, Sarah, a sharp, no-nonsense analyst who had become a good friend, saw the change in me. You're different these days, she said over coffee one morning. Calmer. You shut Ben down in that meeting yesterday like a pro. What's up? I hesitated, then told her a condensed version of the story. I expected pity, but she just nodded, her expression serious. Good for you, she said simply. It's about time. But listen, Robert, this kind of thing, it leaves a mark. You should talk to someone. Not just a friend, but a professional. She was right. The silence in my apartment was peaceful, but it was also filled with the ghosts of 30 years of emotional baggage. I looked up therapists online and made an appointment with a woman named Mara. Walking into her office was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But as I sat on her comfortable couch and, for the first time, told the entire story from start to finish to a complete stranger, I felt a release I hadn't known was possible. "Robert," Mara said, her voice kind but direct, "you've been acting as the emotional and financial regulator for your entire family. When they felt unstable, you were expected to stabilize them. Now that you've stepped away, they don't know how to function. This chaos is their problem to solve, not yours." Leaving her office that day, I felt lighter. The constant, low-grade hum of guilt that had been my lifelong companion was finally starting to fade. I had a war to win at work and a new life to build for myself. For the first time, the path forward, while scary, was entirely my own. The day of the final presentation for the tech company deal was grueling. It was a 12-hour marathon of meetings, negotiations, and last-minute changes. Ben was at his worst, constantly trying to one-up me in front of Mr. Davenport, but I stayed focused, sticking to the facts, the numbers, and the strategy one had painstakingly developed. By 7 p.m. it was over. We had shaken hands. They said they would have a decision by the end of the week. As we packed up our briefcases, Mr. Davenport pulled me aside. "Good work today, Robert," he said, his eyes sharp. "You handled the pressure. You handled Ben." I was impressed. Coming from him, it was the highest praise. A small flicker of pride ignited in my chest. I left the office exhausted but wired. My mind was racing, replaying every moment of the meeting. Did I say the right thing? Was our offer strong enough? The fate of my career felt like it was hanging in the balance. This deal wasn't just about a commission. It was my declaration to the world, and to myself, that I was more than my family's narrative. It was my shot at a real promotion, at becoming a person they could never again label a disgrace. Instead of going straight home, I decided to drive. I just needed to clear my head. I drove through the city streets, the traffic lights blurring into streaks of red and green. I found myself heading towards the waterfront, the dark, calm expanse of the bay a welcome sight. I pulled out my phone and drafted a final follow-up email to the client, a short, polite note thanking them for their time. It was a long shot, but it felt proactive. I hit send, the word zipping off into the digital ether. I put the phone down and pulled up to a red light at a large intersection. The street was slick from a recent drizzle. I remember looking at the green light for the cross traffic, watching the cars pass. I was thinking about what Mara had said in our last session. "You're allowed to have your own victories." Maybe this deal would be one. I was so lost in thought, I didn't see the black SUV until it was too late. It was coming through the intersection from my left, going way too fast. The driver must have blown their red light. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the headlights, wide and blinding like the eyes of a predator. I heard the screech of tires, a sound that seemed to tear the air apart. My hands gripped the steering wheel. There was no time to react, no time to even breathe. There was just a deafening, violent explosion of metal and glass. The impact threw me sideways, the seatbelt cutting hard into my chest. My head slammed against the driver's side window, and for a moment, the world was a kaleidoscope of shattering glass and streetlights spinning out of control. My car was lifted, twisted, and then everything went dark as the vehicle flipped, the roof scraping against the asphalt with a horrifying, grinding shriek. Then silence, a ringing in my ears, the smell of gasoline and something burning. I was hanging upside down, held in place only by my seatbelt. Pain, sharp and electric, shot through my shoulder and my ribs. I tried to move, but a wave of dizziness washed over me. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was the faint, blurry image of someone running towards the wreckage. Waking up was a slow, painful process. It was less like opening my eyes and more like swimming up from a deep, dark ocean. The first thing I registered was the smell, antiseptic and sterile. The second was the steady, rhythmic beeping of a machine next to me. I forced my eyes open. The world was blurry, the ceiling a stark, white expanse. I was in a hospital bed. A dull, throbbing ache radiated from my entire left side. I tried to sit up and a sharp pain in my chest made me gasp. Easy there. A nurse with a kind face appeared at my side. You took quite a tumble. You're lucky. A concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a dislocated shoulder, but you're going to be okay. I blinked, trying to piece together the memory of headlights and screeching metal. The other driver? I rasped, my throat raw. They're fine. They're also in a lot of trouble, she said, checking my 4-drip. Your family is outside. They've been here for hours. Can I let them in? My heart sank. Family, of course. In my wallet, my emergency contact was still my mother. I hadn't gotten around to changing it. A wave of dread washed over me that was more painful than my injuries. I wasn't ready, but what could I say? I gave a weak nod. My sister Ellie came in first, alone. Her face was pale, her eyes red and puffy from crying. The usual bravado and entitlement were gone, replaced by a raw, fragile fear. She stood hesitantly at the foot of my bed, clutching a bag of snacks from the vending machine. Hey, she whispered. Hey, I managed to say. She took a shaky breath. They told us. They said the car was totaled. When we got the call, I thought. She couldn't finish the sentence. She just shook her head, a tear rolling down her cheek. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the beeping of the heart monitor. I had expected accusations, blame, maybe even a lecture about how my selfish actions had led to this. But there was none of that. I'm so sorry, Rob, she finally said, her voice cracking. For everything. I just looked at her, waiting. When you left, after you stopped paying for school, I was so angry, she confessed, her gaze fixed on the floor. But then the panic set in. Mom and Dad. They had no idea what to do. They were like children. They started talking about selling the house, about their retirement funds being empty. She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with a guilt I had never seen in them before. And I realized, you were never just helping out. You were holding everything up. All of it. For all of us. And we never even thanked you. She took a step closer to the bed. I used you. I know that now. I let you carry everything so I didn't have to. It was easier to think of you as the boring, responsible one so I could be the cool, creative one. Then came the words that recontextualized my entire life. It's what Mom and Dad taught me, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Not in words, but in everything they did. Every time you succeeded at something, they'd downplay it. But they always told me, you have to make something of yourself, Ellie. You don't want to end up struggling like your brother. A bitter, hollow feeling filled my chest. Struggling. They had painted me as a cautionary tale to her, even as they cashed my checks. I wasn't just the utility. I was the boogeyman, the example of a failed life used to motivate their golden child. The pieces of their manipulation, scattered for years, finally clicked into a single ugly picture. It wasn't just about the money. They needed me to be a failure to justify their focus on her success. I'm so sorry, she whispered again, tears now flowing freely. You didn't deserve any of it. Before I could process it all, the door opened and my parents walked in. My father looked 10 years older, his face ashen. My mother's composure was gone, her face a mess of fear and regret. They saw me, hooked up to machines and bruised, and their own narrative about their failure of a son seemed to die right there in their eyes. The beeping of the heart monitor suddenly seemed very, very loud. My parents hovered in the doorway, their faces a mixture of relief and gut-wrenching shame. My father, Richard, a man I'd rarely seen show any emotion other than anger or disappointment, looked utterly broken. My mother, Helen, wrung her hands. Her usual icy demeanor melted away. Robert, my father started, his voice thick. We heard about the accident. We came as fast as we could. He took a step forward, then stopped, as if there was an invisible wall between us. Please, just let us. I didn't mean it. What I said that night. I swear to God, I didn't mean it. His words, the ones that had echoed in my mind for weeks, now sounded pathetic and hollow. He was apologizing to the son he thought he had almost lost, not the son he had willingly wounded. My mother stepped forward, her eyes pleading. He's right, Robert. We were angry and we said horrible things. You didn't deserve any of it. We just want you to come home. We can figure everything out. The mortgage, Ellie's college. We'll figure it out. I looked from their desperate faces to Ellie, who was standing by the window, giving me space. They were trying. In their own clumsy, terrified way, they were trying. But their solution was still the same. For me to come back into the fold, to resume my role, maybe with a few apologies thrown in as a bonus. My heart ached with a familiar resignation. Maybe this was the best it would ever get. Maybe I was destined to just, "Excuse me, is this Robert's room?" A new voice cut through the heavy, emotional fog. I turned my head. Standing in the doorway was my boss, Mr. Davenport. He was dressed in a sharp suit, holding a leather briefcase, looking completely out of place in the sterile hospital environment. My parents and Ellie turned, startled. "Mr. Davenport?" I said, confused. "What are you doing here?" "Sarah told me what happened," he said, his expression one of genuine concern. "I came as soon as I heard." "Good God, son. Are you all right?" "I'll be okay," I said, trying to push myself up slightly. My father stepped forward, puffing out his chest a little, as if to assert some kind of parental authority. "I'm Richard, Robert's father. Thank you for coming to see him." Mr. Davenport gave him a curt, professional nod, then turned his attention back to me. He clearly had no time for small talk. "Robert, listen. I know this is a terrible time, but I had to tell you in person. I just got off the phone with the tech executives." My breath caught in my throat. The deal. I had completely forgotten. Mr. Davenport's stern face broke into a rare, wide smile. "They're in. They loved the pitch. They loved your strategy. They said your follow-up email last night sealed it. We got the contract, Robert. You landed the biggest client in this firm's history." A wave of disbelief washed over me. I just stared at him, speechless. My parents looked on, confused by the sudden shift in conversation from family drama to corporate business. But Mr. Davenport wasn't finished. "The board held an emergency meeting this morning," he continued, his voice resonating with authority in the small room. "It was a unanimous decision. The partnership we discussed. It's yours. The official offer, with the new salary and profit-sharing details, will be on your desk when you get back." He clapped his hand on my good shoulder. "Congratulations, Robert. Welcome to the top floor." Silence. A thick, profound silence filled the room. I looked at my parents. Their mouths were literally hanging open. Their faces were a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock. The color drained from my father's face. My mother looked as if she had been struck. In that single moment, their entire reality had been shattered. The son they had labeled a disgrace, a failure, a cautionary tale, the son they believed was struggling, had just been publicly crowned a king in his own kingdom. His value, his success, his power had been validated by an outside source so undeniable, so authoritative, that all their years of dismissive comments and belittling remarks evaporated into thin air. They weren't looking at their broken, dependent son anymore. They were looking at a partner. A man who had just become more successful than my father ever was. A man who didn't need them. A man they had just tried to manipulate back into paying their bills, who they now realized held all the cards. The power dynamic in our family didn't just shift. It was a hostile takeover. This was it. This was the moment that changed everything. When I finally, unequivocally, took back control of my own life. Thank you so much for sticking with me to this point. You have no idea how much it means. If you're still here, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you made it this far with me. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It tells me that my experiences matter to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. After Mr. Davenport left, a new kind of silence descended upon the hospital room. It wasn't the awkward, tense silence of before. It was the heavy, stunned silence of a world turned upside down. My parents couldn't look at me. They stared at the floor, at the walls, at anything but the son who had just become a stranger to them. The nurse came in to check my vitals, and they used the interruption as an excuse to retreat, muttering something about getting coffee. Ellie, however, stayed. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a dawning understanding. "A partner?" she whispered. "Wow, Rob, that's wow." There was no jealousy in her voice, only awe. It was as if she was seeing me for the first time, not as her brother, but as a person in my own right. The next 2 days in the hospital were a blur of doctors, nurses, and jello. My parents visited, but they were different. They were timid, hesitant. They brought flowers and magazines. They asked me if I needed anything. They spoke to me with a formal respect they usually reserved for people like their bank manager or their doctor. The dynamic was so profoundly altered it felt like I was with two entirely different people. They never mentioned money. They never mentioned me coming home. When I was discharged, the doctor gave me a list of instructions and a prescription for painkillers. Ellie was the one who had arranged to pick me up. My parents were waiting in the lobby, looking lost. "We can take you home, Robert," my father offered, his voice quiet. I looked at him, then at my mother. I saw the fear in their eyes, the fear that the connection, however damaged, was now severed for good. I took a deep breath, the air still hurting my bruised ribs. "Thanks, Dad," I said, my voice clear and steady. "But I'm not coming home." The words hung in the air. This wasn't the angry proclamation of a hurt son. It was a statement of fact from an adult. "Not yet," I added, giving them a sliver of something, though I wasn't sure if it was hope or just a reprieve. "Maybe not ever. But I need some time. I need to think about things." My mother just nodded, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. She didn't argue. She didn't try to guilt me. For the first time, she accepted my decision as my own. Ellie helped me into her car, the silence between us comfortable. As we drove away from the hospital, I looked back and saw my parents standing on the curb, watching us leave. They looked small and frail. They weren't the towering figures of my childhood anymore. They were just two people who had made a lifetime of mistakes and were only now, finally, beginning to understand the cost. I wasn't their ATM, their scapegoat, or their failure anymore. I was just Robert, and Robert was driving away. The weeks following the accident were defined by small, seismic shifts. I was on medical leave from work, my arm in a sling, my ribs aching with every breath. Ellie became my unexpected caretaker. She'd stop by my apartment every day after her classes with groceries or takeout, help me with things I couldn't manage with one good arm, and then quietly do her homework at my small kitchen table. One afternoon, she was on the phone, her voice low. "No, I understand," she was saying. "I can pick up an extra shift on Saturday." When she hung up, I looked at her. "Extra shift?" She flushed slightly. "Yeah, I got a job. At a coffee shop near campus. It's not glamorous, but it pays." She hesitated. "I called the financial aid office. They set me up on a new payment plan for my tuition. It'll be tight, but I can do it." I just stared at her. My sister, who had once demanded a new laptop because her old one was the wrong shade of silver, was now working a minimum wage job to pay her own way. She was taking responsibility. The change was staggering. A few days later, an official-looking envelope arrived in my mail. It was from my parents' mortgage company. I almost threw it away, assuming it was a misdelivered notice. Curiosity got the better of me. I tore it open with my good hand. It was a confirmation of a change to the account. My name had been officially removed as a co-borrower. The loan had been restructured entirely in their names. It was a legal document, cold and impersonal, but to me, it was the most heartfelt apology they could have given. It was an action. They weren't just saying they would handle it. They were actually doing it. They had gone to the bank, faced the music of their financial irresponsibility, and taken my name and my obligation out of the equation. The static from their side of the world had gone quiet. No more frantic calls. No more manipulative texts from Aunt Carol. I learned later that my father had a very blunt conversation with her, telling her that their family issues were theirs to handle from now on. I was still in pain. My body was healing, but the emotional wounds were deep and complex. On Sarah's recommendation, I resumed my therapy sessions with Mara, this time over video call. They're acting, not just talking, I told her, describing the changes. But I don't know what to feel. I'm still so angry. You have every right to be angry, Mara said gently. Healing isn't about forgetting the anger. It's about acknowledging it and choosing not to let it control you anymore. Their actions aren't for you, Robert. They are the consequences of your actions. You set a boundary, and for the first time, they are being forced to respect it. This is their journey of change. You just get to decide, in your own time, if you want to be at their destination. It was a profound thought. For the first time, I wasn't responsible for their journey. I was only responsible for my own. And my journey was just beginning. 6 months passed. The sling came off, my ribs healed, and I returned to work, not as a manager, but as a partner. The new role was demanding, challenging, and incredibly rewarding. I moved into a larger apartment in a better part of the city, a place with a balcony and a view that wasn't a brick wall. My life was finally, tangibly, my own. I kept my distance from my parents, but the silence was no longer absolute. It had softened into a cautious quiet. My mother started sending occasional, tentative texts. Mom, saw that your favorite team won last night. Thought of you. Mom, the roses in the garden are blooming. They're beautiful this year. They were small, fragile olive branches, offered with no expectation of a response. I rarely replied, but I read them. They were attempts at connection that didn't involve a crisis or a request. It was new territory for all of us. Ellie was the bridge. She'd call me once a week to check in, telling me about her job, her classes, her own struggles with balancing work and school. She had matured more in those 6 months than she had in the previous 20 years. Dad sold his old record collection, she told me one day, and Mom is selling her jewelry on Etsy, the stuff she makes. They're trying really hard, Rob. One Saturday, my mother sent a text that was different. Mom, I'm going to be at a cafe near your new place tomorrow morning. If you're free, I'd love to buy you a coffee. If not, I completely understand. The lack of pressure, the acknowledgement of my freedom to say no, was what made me consider it. I texted back a single word, okay. The meeting was awkward at first. We talked about the weather, my new apartment, her Etsy store. It was polite, surface-level conversation. But then, she looked at me, her eyes filled with a sadness that seemed ancient. I need you to know something, Robert, she said, her voice low. It doesn't excuse anything, but I want you to understand. She told me about my father, about how, before I was born, he wasn't a disgruntled middle manager. He was a musician, a gifted guitarist in a band that was starting to get noticed. They had a record deal on the table, a tour lined up. It was his dream. Then I got pregnant with you, she said, her gaze distant. It was unexpected. A record deal and a tour. That's no life for a baby. He had to choose. So he chose us. He walked away from the music, took a stable job in sales, and never looked back. She paused, stirring her coffee, though it was already cold. But he did look back. I think a part of him always looked back. He never said it, not in so many words, but he resented it. He resented the sacrifice. And when you were born, I think sometimes when he looked at you, he saw the life he gave up. It hit me like a physical blow. The anger, the bitterness, the constant implication that I was a disappointment. It wasn't all about me. It was about him. I was the living, breathing symbol of his buried dream. He hadn't been angry at my failures. He'd been angry at my very existence, for what it had cost him. He poured all of his frustrated ambitions into Ellie, she continued, a tear slipping down her cheek. He wanted her to have the artistic, successful life he never got. And you became the responsible one. The one who had to be the adult he was forced to become. It was so unfair. We put a burden on you that was never yours to carry. We broke our own hearts, and then we blamed you for it. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession. A painful, ugly truth that had festered in the heart of our family for 3 decades. I didn't feel forgiveness, not yet. But for the first time, beneath the layers of anger and hurt, I felt a flicker of something else. Understanding. A few weeks after that coffee with my mother, Ellie called. "Hey," she started, a nervous energy in her voice. "So, Mom and Dad want to take us out for lunch. All of us. To a neutral place. No strings attached. Just lunch. You don't have to. But they really want to." A year ago, I would have said no instantly. 6 months ago, I would have ignored the request. But something had shifted after my mother's confession. The anger was still there, a low-burning ember, but it was no longer a raging fire. "Okay, Ellie," I said. "I'll go." We met at a quiet Italian restaurant halfway between my apartment and their house. When I walked in, they were already there, sitting at a corner booth. They stood up when they saw me, a gesture of respect that felt both bizarre and significant. The meal was stilted, filled with the same kind of small talk I'd had with my mother. But this time, my father was the one who broke the tension. He cleared his throat, pushing his half-eaten pasta away. "Robert," he said, looking me directly in the eye for what felt like the first time. "There's something I need to tell you. I sold the boat." I blinked. "The boat? I thought you hadn't bought it yet." "No," he said, shaking his head. "My boat. The little fishing boat I've had for 20 years. It was the one thing that was just mine." He took a shaky breath. "I sold it. And the new truck. We used the money to pay off all our credit card debt. We're gonna make it work on our own now. No more asking you for anything." To sell his boat. For him, that was like cutting off a limb. It was his escape, his one selfish pleasure. It was a tangible sacrifice, a real-world consequence he had imposed on himself. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over his. She looked at me. "We've been going to counseling, Robert. Together. And I've realized something. For years, I stopped looking at you as my son. I started looking at you as a solution. A solution to our money problems, to our stress, to our own failures. That wasn't fair to you." Her voice cracked. "I miss my son. I want to get to know him again." I looked at these two people, my parents, and I saw them not as monsters, but as flawed, broken human beings who were trying, in their own imperfect way, to pick up the pieces of the mess they had made. "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. "Both of you. I can't say I forgive you. I'm not there yet. But this," I gestured around the table, "this is a start." For the rest of the lunch, we didn't solve 30 years of dysfunction. We didn't erase the hurt. But we talked. We talked about Ellie's job, my new projects at work, a movie my dad had seen. We talked like a normal family. It was clumsy and strange, but underneath it all was the quiet, fragile hum of a single, powerful thing. Effort. And for the first time in a very long time, it felt like enough. The next few months were a series of small, tentative steps forward. A text message here, a short phone call there. We had coffee a few more times. They even came to my new apartment once, looking around with a sense of awe, as if they were tourists in a foreign land. They were respectful of my space, of my life. The change was real and it was consistent. On my 33rd birthday, a package arrived at my office. It was from my parents. I was hesitant to open it, half expecting something extravagant and tone-deaf, a throwback to their old way of thinking. But it wasn't. Inside, there was no expensive watch or gift card. There was just a simple silver picture frame. And in the frame was a photo of me at 17. I was standing on a beach, grinning at the camera, my hair a mess from the wind, the sun in my eyes. I was holding a surfboard, looking awkward but incredibly happy. I remembered that day. It was a rare, perfect family vacation before the weight of their financial burdens had fully crushed us. It was one of the last times I remembered feeling truly carefree. I smiled at the memory, a genuine, uncomplicated smile. I was about to put the frame on my desk when I noticed something written on the cardboard backing. I slid the photo out. It was my mother's handwriting, neat and careful. It said, "You have always carried more than you should have. I am so sorry. Love, Mom." Beneath it, in my father's messy, almost illegible scrawl, were two words. "Me too." I sank into my office chair, staring at the words. It wasn't a dramatic, tearful apology in a hospital room. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was quiet. It was private. And it was the most honest thing they had ever said to me. It was an acknowledgement, an admission of the truth I had carried alone for so long. They saw it. They finally, truly saw it. I looked back at the picture of the 17-year-old boy on the beach, so full of unburdened joy. And then I looked at the words on the back of the frame. The anger I had held onto for so long, the ember that had glowed in my chest, didn't vanish in a puff of smoke, but it cooled, settled. It became something I could finally put down. We're not perfect now. We never will be. There are still awkward silences and topics we avoid. The scars are still there. But we're learning. They are learning to respect my boundaries. And I am learning that forgiveness isn't a single event, but a slow, quiet process. It's not about erasing the past. It's about accepting that you can't change it and choosing to build a different future. For the first time in my life, I don't have to disappear to keep the peace. I can just be here, present and whole, and that is enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it touched you in some way. It's a reminder that sometimes the most broken things can be put back together, not as they were, but as something new and maybe even something stronger. Have you ever had to completely redefine a relationship in your life? I'd be honored if you shared your own story or thoughts in the comments below. And please, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what I share next. Your support truly means the world.